The wind in the Wyoming Territory did not just blow. It hunted. It scraped the high plains with dust and grit, tearing at anything weak enough to bend. It whispered through dry grass and thorny brush, a lonely sound that had followed Eli Consincade for all of his 30 years. He stood by his fence line under the hard noon sun, his hat pulled low, his gloved hands checking wire with quiet skill. Out here, alone with cattle and red dirt, his hands never shook. His voice never failed him. The land made sense. People did not. Eli was a tall man, long and narrow, built like he was afraid of taking up too much room in the world. He moved with care, like noise itself might punish him. His father had left him this land, but he had also left him debt. $400 at the bank, a weight that pressed on his chest every morning when he woke. The note no longer belonged to the bank. Harlan Pike owned it now. Pike owned half the basin, and he wanted the other half too. When Eli looked north, he saw dust on the horizon, not a storm, cattle, Pike's cattle. Thousands of them, moving closer to the creek that marked the line between Pike's empire and Eli's struggling ranch. Eli knew what that meant. If he lost the creek, he lost everything. And the court had already made it clear. A single man with no family had weak claim to land. A household mattered. A wife mattered. That was why Eli turned his horse toward town that day. He hated Red Rock, hated the eyes, hated the voices. But the stage was due. He touched the folded paper in his vest, the edges soft from sweat and handling. A contract. A marriage by proxy. He had sent money he could barely spare to a service in Tucson. A last gamble made in the dead quiet of winter nights. He needed a wife, not for love, but for survival. The shame of that burned worse than the sun. The sky turned on him before he reached town. Dark clouds rolled in fast, swallowing the light. The wind shifted, sharp and cold. Rain came hard, driving sideways. Eli tied his horse outside the station and stood under the overhang, arms tight to his chest. Men shouted. Shutters slammed. Laughter drifted from the saloon porch. He felt eyes on him, or maybe he only imagined them. When the stage finally arrived, it came out of the storm like a wounded animal. Horses screaming, wheels skidding through mud. A salesman jumped out and ran for cover. Then there was a pause. A small boot appeared, worn leather, cracked heel. She stepped down slowly into the rain. She did not run. She stood there, steadying herself, rain soaking her dark gray dress. She was thin, sharp. Her shawl was pulled tight, her bonnet low, but strands of copper hair clung to her cheek. Her eyes were green and watchful. Not lost, not soft. Eli forced himself forward. His boots sank into the mud. He pulled off his hat, rain soaking his hair at once. "Miss Vale?" he asked. His voice cracked. He hated that. She turned and studied him, not his face first, but his hands, his belt, his eyes. "Mr. Consincade," she said. He nodded. He could not hold her gaze. He pointed toward his wagon. "We should go. The creek rises fast." She paused. 2 women under the store awning stared at her, whispered. Not quietly enough. "That's her. Saloon trash." He must be desperate. Eli flinched. He waited for her to break. She did not. She lifted her bag, small and battered. "I am ready." The bag was light. Too light. Eli took it without comment and helped her onto the wagon. His hand brushed her arm. She stiffened. He pulled back at once. "I am sorry," he said. "It is fine," she replied, staring ahead. The ride home was long and silent. Rain turned ruts into rivers. Eli focused on the horses, speaking to them low and calm. She watched the empty land slide past, wide and quiet and unforgiving. This silence was worse than noise. If someone screamed here, no one would hear. The house appeared at dusk, small and weathered, tucked against a rise. Eli helped her down and led her inside. Warmth met them. Fire, coffee, clean floors. Simple furniture. I sleep in the loft, he said quickly. That room is yours. She stepped inside the bedroom, a narrow bed, a quilt, a chest. On a shelf sat a small wooden horse and a faded red ribbon. She reached out. "Do not," Eli said sharply. She froze. He crossed the room and shoved the items into a drawer, hands shaking. "I'm sorry," he said, his back to her. "They are old." "It is all right," she said quietly. They ate stew in silence. Outside, the storm passed, leaving a heavy stillness. The lamp cast long shadows. Eli washed dishes with his back turned. The air tightened. She stood. "Mr. Consincade," she said. "Eli," he corrected softly. She took a breath. Her hands trembled as she unbuttoned her collar. "I know what is expected," she said. "I am your wife now." Eli turned pale. "Clara," he said, voice rough, "what are you doing?" "I want to be a good wife," she said, stepping closer, eyes down. Shame burned her face. "No," Eli said. The word broke from him like pain. She stopped. "I will not touch you," he said. "Not unless you choose it. Not ever unless you want it. You are safe here." The room went very still. She shook. "I do not know how to be safe," she whispered. Eli moved slowly, hands gentle on her arms. "We will learn," he said, "together." She leaned into him, just enough to rest her forehead against his chest. For the first time, she did not count the seconds until escape. And above them, the Wyoming wind began to rise again. The first month on the Consincade Ranch scraped Clara down to the bone. The land did not care where she had come from. It only cared what she could lift, carry, and endure. Her hands blistered and split. The cold water from the pump numbed her fingers until they burned. She learned to chop wood without letting the axe bounce. She learned how to keep moving when the wind tried to knock the breath out of her chest. Eli watched without hovering. He taught her quietly. He never shouted. He never rushed her. When she did something wrong, he showed her again, slow and patient. That patience made her uneasy. In her life, patience usually meant something worse was coming later. But days passed. Weeks passed. The explosion never came. The town was harder. When they rode into Red Rock for supplies, the silence followed them like a shadow. Eyes tracked Clara as she walked the store aisles. The clerk smirked and said items were reserved. Eli stepped in without raising his voice. He paid. He stood between her and the stairs. Outside, Clara told him he did not have to do that. "You are my wife," he said. "They do not get to speak to you that way." She wanted to believe him. She wanted words to matter. But she had seen how power worked. She had learned that truth bent for men like Pike. The pressure grew. Papers arrived. Notices. Claims about water rights. A deputy rode out and hinted at fines. He smiled too easily. He tipped his hat to Clara and asked where he had seen her before. Eli's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. When the man left, the dust hung in the air like a threat. Then it turned physical. Clara went into town alone one afternoon. She told Eli she could handle it. On the way back, a hand grabbed her wrist and dragged her into an alley. The man smelled of beer and sweat. He laughed and spoke like she was an object he had already paid for. She went still. She reached for the small knife she kept hidden. A voice cut through the alley. "Let her go!" Eli stood at the mouth of the alley, empty hands, body coiled tight. The man laughed and shoved Clara. He reached for his gun. Eli moved. He blocked the arm, drove a fist into the man's chest, and slammed him into the wall. He held him there, eyes burning. He did not shout. He did not curse. "If you ever touch her again," Eli said, low and shaking, "I will not stop." He dropped the man and turned to Clara at once. The rage vanished from his face like it had never been there. "Did he hurt you?" he asked. She shook her head. The ride home was fast and silent. At the ranch, Eli shook. He said he was dangerous. He said he was like his father. Clara snapped back that he was wrong. She told him she chose him. They stood in the cold twilight, breath rising, Anger and fear tangled tight between them. That night, the truth came out. Eli told her about his father, about the violence, about the fear that lived in his blood. Clara listened. She told him a man afraid of hurting others was not a monster. A monster did not care. The attacks shifted. Fences were cut at night. Cattle wandered into bad country. They rode for hours in the dark, turning the herd back from cliffs and ravines. At dawn, Pike's foreman appeared on the ridge with a smile and words that tasted like poison. He hinted that maps changed, owners changed. He stared at Clara too long. Eli held his ground. He chose restraint. Clara saw how much it cost him. Then the rope came. Clara was at the creek when a loop dropped over her shoulders and yanked tight. She was dragged to a tree. A masked man pressed close and whispered that this was a warning. He cut her arm just enough to bleed. He said next time the rope would go over a branch. When Eli saw her, something inside him went empty. He loaded his guns in silence and said he would kill them all. Clara stopped him. She told him that choosing not to kill was not weakness. She told him she needed a living husband, not a dead hero. She told him he had already won the hardest fight. They decided to leave, to ride to Cheyenne with the evidence Clara had kept hidden. Letters, pages from a ledger, names and payments. Proof that Pike bought law and land with stolen cattle and blood money. They planned to go at night. Pike moved faster. Fire bloomed in the dark. The hay yard burned like a signal flare. Winter feed went up in smoke. Eli stood at the window, face stripped bare of fear. "Get the letters," he said. "We ride now." They ran. Snow came early. The cold cut deep. They rode hard, camped light, watched the horizon. Cheyenne rose from the plains like noise and smoke and stone. The courthouse smelled of wood polish and tired men. The clerk sneered. The lawyer listened. They needed a witness. They found one. Then the law found Clara first. A warrant from Red Rock. A lie wrapped in paper. The charge was theft. The plan was simple. Discredit her. Silence her. Eli nearly drew his gun in the street. Clara stepped forward and surrendered. The cell was cold. The courtroom colder. They laughed at her past. They tried to break her with it. Clara stood and told the truth anyway. Eli spoke after her. The judge listened. The hearing was delayed one day. They needed the ledger. They broke into Pike's rooms that night. Clara moved like a shadow. She found the book. Pike found her. She ran. They rode for their lives with the ledger in the saddlebag. Shots cracked the night. Bells rang. They reached the ranch at dawn. Dust clouds rose on both horizons. Pike's men, the sheriff's posse. Eli barred the door. "Load the rifles," he said. Outside, horses thundered closer. Inside, Clara hid the book under the floor. They stood together in the dark, backs to the wall, waiting. The Wyoming wind howled, and the siege began. The gunfire tore into the ranch house like a storm made of iron. Bullets punched through wood and glass. Splinters flew across the room. Eli worked the rifle with steady rhythm, his jaw set, his body moving on instinct. Clara stayed low behind the overturned table, watching the door, counting breaths, counting shots. Fear was there, sharp and real, but it did not own her. Outside, Pike's voice carried over the chaos, smooth and cruel. He called Clara a mistake. He told Eli to send her out. He promised land and peace if Eli gave her up. Eli did not answer. He looked at Clara once. She met his eyes and nodded. That was enough. The shooting shifted. Shouts rose, confused and angry. Then a new voice cut through the noise, loud and commanding. "Federal law! Orders to stand down." The gunfire slowed, then stopped. Eli peered through the broken boards. Riders had entered the yard from the south. Not Pike's men. A lawyer from Cheyenne. A federal marshal. And behind them, townsmen who had stayed silent for too long. Pike panicked. He threw fire instead of words. Flames caught the barn in seconds. The horses screamed. Eli ran without thinking, heat blistering his skin as he tore open the doors. The animals burst free, wild with terror. Smoke rolled thick and black. The roof groaned and collapsed. Behind him, Pike reached for a gun. Eli reached him first. He knocked the pistol away and dragged Pike to his feet. His fist rose. His whole body shook with the weight of what he could do. He stopped. "I am not you," Eli said, and shoved Pike into the dirt. The marshal took him away in irons. The barn burned to nothing. They stood in the ashes, shaking, alive. The ranch was scarred, but the house still stood. The ledger came out from under the floor. The truth finally had daylight. Winter was brutal, hay was scarce, hands cracked and bled, but the law moved faster than the snow. Pike was convicted. His land was seized. The creek belonged to the Consincades again. The town did not change all at once. Some nodded now, some still turned away. Clara stopped trying to earn their kindness. She earned her peace instead. They rebuilt slowly, board by board, fence by fence. When a frightened boy hid in the new barn, they fed him and gave him work. The ranch grew quieter, stronger. Nightmares came sometimes. Clara woke shaking. Eli held her and spoke until the fear passed. He did not try to fix her. He stayed. Spring arrived rough and muddy. Green pushed through the scars. The cattle grew fat again. Water ran clear. One evening, as the sun sank low, Clara stood in front of Eli and smiled. Not the careful smile she used to survive, but a real one. "I am your wife," she said softly. "Can I?" Eli laughed, warm and full, and pulled her close. "Yes," he said, "always." They sat on the porch as stars filled the sky. The wind still moved across the plains, hard and honest. The land was harsh. The past was heavy. But they were not alone. And that was enough.